You're listening to Spotlight, the podcast that fosters connections with veterans and military spouses. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Welcome, everybody. This is Bob Louthan, and I am very pleased today to have as my guest Jen Amos. She's stepping into the spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. I'm going to school today. She is an award-winning podcaster and entrepreneur. As she mentioned in the intro, she's the host of Holding Down the Fort podcast. She's been recognized as the Media Professional of the Year on the Rosie Network Entrepreneur Awards. She's married to my friend Scott Tucker of US Vet Wealth, another podcaster. It must run in the family. Jen, thanks for stepping into the spotlight and coming on the episode here today with me.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Bob. I'm really happy to be here, and I hope I can add a lot of value to your followers today.
So let's start with a little story. I would love for you to share with our guests what you and Scott did for Christmas.
All right, here we go. So last year we started to share dreams of like, hey, eventually we just want to live out of an RV. And so we first did that in March before the pandemic happens. And then for most of the year, we were, stuck at home, and we started to feel a little stir crazy. At least I did. And so we were just talking about like, hey, at the end of the year, let's do something special. Let's get out of the house. Like, we don't care where we go. Let's just go somewhere. And so we decided to get an RV, and we're like, what about Nashville? Like, I've never been there. You've never been there. Like, let's just drive there. Let's just let that be our destination. And so Bob, we started driving to Nashville, I believe, starting like Sunday, like the week of Christmas. And I remember we arrived Christmas Eve at nighttime at this bridge. And you'll have to forgive me. I can't think of the name of the bridge right now, but I remember as we were driving to Nashville, I said, what is in Nashville anyway? So I went on Instagram and I tried to find I tried to find one of those accounts that really talk all about Nashville and like where's the hot places to go to. And so there was this bridge that they recommended that happened to be overlooking the AT&T Tower over there in downtown Nashville. And so we drove there Christmas Eve, and we decided to park in that area. So we actually parked near the Nissan Stadium, which is kind of across the bridge, across the river of the AT&T Tower. So Christmas morning, I wake up to an explosion. And I think the way that Scott described it was like being in Iraq again and hearing, and you're going to have to help me with the acronym here, hearing and I forgot the acronym, but hearing an explosion go off.
An IED, maybe?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he said to me it felt like an IED going off. Yep. And I remember we were peeking out of our RV. Fortunately, like I said, we were across the street. We were safe. My dog did bark, obviously, because that's what dogs do when they hear things they're not familiar with. And I remember peeking out our RV window, and all we saw was this big black smoke just coming up in the air, right near the AT&T Tower or AT&T building. And at first we're like, what was that? And before you know it, Bob, there was like police cars just like speeding into downtown. There was fire trucks, like it was everything. And so we ended up coming over to, we drove to like kind of across the river to see all this happen. And you see these buildings and the windows just shattered, just like, all gone and everything. And you can kind of see like some curtains, like, like kind of flowing outside of these windows. And
of course you're driving an RV, and that's what was the vehicle that the guy used that he detonated. So all of a sudden you're attracting some attention.
Yeah. So, I still wanted to drive around. So we're like, hey, can we at least just go to one of the national parks here? Because like we have a dog and I want to experience like a little bit of Nashville. But like you said, Bob, on the radio, it said that it was an RV that caused the explosion. And so we parked at this park over here. And long and behold, we had two sheriffs drive in front of us, two sheriffs drive behind us, and one right next to us. And they said, hey, we got a report that there was an RV at the park and they were suspicious. And so we needed to check you out. And it was funny because the sheriffs were actually laughing. They were like, oh, come on. Like, no one's going to blow up this like good looking Mercedes-Benz RV, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they're very kind about it. Fortunately, we're really grateful for that. But at that point, we knew it was time to go. We're like, you know what? Like we overwelcomed our stay, and we made it to Nashville. That was our primary goal. We had no other objective than to show up here. And then this happened. So now we have a fun thing to talk about with people. And that's it. And so we ended up just kind of leaving that day and going to Chattanooga and just visiting there for a little bit. And then, slowly made our way back, went to Asheville, North Carolina, which was a ton of fun. It was pretty lively there. I was pleasantly surprised. And yeah, so that was my Christmas, Bob.
Evidently, Chattanooga's got a killer aquarium of all the places, in the heart of the mountains down there. And of course, Asheville is beautiful. So, and then Scott Tucker's been on, has been in the spotlight before. Being podcasting seems to run in your family. He's become a podcasting animal, hasn't he?
Yes. When he started his show, Veteran World Secrets, so I collectively at this point, I've been podcasting for about 2 years. I'm pretty sure collectively I've done a total of like 300 episodes, but that's through a course of time. That's like once or twice a week of interviews. Maybe sometimes I'm overly ambitious, but Scott started Veteran World Secrets, I think a little after Veterans Day. So this is not too long ago. This was a couple weeks ago at this point. And he's already reached his 50th episode.
It's he mentioned that number to me the other day, and I was just like, "Is that all you're doing?"
Yeah, I'm more of like,
he's recording random phone conversations and turning them into podcasts. I'm going to accuse him of that.
What he does, Bob, is he does Facebook Live. And so, it's really easy to produce a show when you just live stream something. But, it's funny, for me, I'm more of like, my mentality is like, it's a marathon. I'm like, I'm going to pace myself. But Scott, we're so different because he likes to do sprints. Like when he's into something, he will go all in. And so the fact that he already pumped out like 50 episodes, 50 interviews in a matter of weeks, I'm not surprised because that tends to be who he is. Now, talking about sustaining that is another story. That's you need to follow us to see how that that looks like in the upcoming weeks.
Right. Well, he's catching up with me. I'm into the 60s now. But hey, before we talk a little bit about some of the things I want to ask you about professionally, tell me a little bit about you growing up, and you're from a Gold Star. You're a Gold Star daughter.
Yes, sir. Yes, I am. So my parents are from the Philippines, and they both come from a family of farmers. So that's where I come from. My mom's family is a farmer. They still have a farm today, and so does my dad's side. And they actually very much, I know my dad at least very much loved farming, but I was told that his dad said that he had to join the military. He needed to pursue more opportunities. They weren't in a bad situation, but I think my grandpa, he used to travel to California and be involved in the farming industry there. So I think that's why he said, like, you need to join the military. So he did. He took my mom, and I was born in Yokosuka, Japan Naval Base in the 80s.
So your father was in the Navy?
Yes. Yeah. So,
okay. And in the U.S. Navy?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So
okay.
He was in the U.S. Navy. And yeah, for that first decade, we moved around every 2 to 3 years, typically from either, like, we've been to Japan, South Korea, California. I think there was like other places, but those are the ones I could remember pretty clearly. So my dad was about 18 years in when the military decided to take him back to Japan, where he was going to kind of finish out his last years of service so he can retire 20 years. His last ship was the USS Kitty Hawk, which you can see in downtown San Diego today. And so his ship was going from Japan to South Korea. And this was in 1998 in October when he went missing. So they were out in they were out in sea, and they sent a search crew for 3 days. They couldn't find him, and they continued the investigation for a couple of more months after that. And eventually they just dropped it. And today my dad has a marker in Rosecrans Fort Cemetery in San Diego, in Point Loma specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And his marker is in the location with other markers in which, the service members were missing in action, or, their bodies were never found. So that's where he is.
Did he work on the flight deck?
Yes. So his last ship, so he was on the USS Kitty Hawk. And the story goes that he was last seen in October 1998 on the upper deck. And there was supposedly a typhoon that night.
Huh.
And the next day he went missing. And I actually had an opportunity, Bob, to talk to his best friend who was in
Mhm.
service with him at the start of 2020 on New Year's Day, actually. So a year ago now. And he was the last person to see him. And the thing is, after we had lost my dad, my mom just moved forward as if it never happened. And, I understand. And she had her reasons for doing that. It's really in the recent years when my sister was only 5 or 6 when we lost dad. It's in the recent years where she wanted to learn more about dad's story. So we have been going out of our way to, talk to mom, talk to, family, and even talk to my dad's best friend. And the biggest thing that we're coming to find, Bob, is that my dad had struggled with depression for a very, very long time. He also had suicidal ideation. He actually had attempted once when I was 1 year old while he was in service.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of gathering that, obviously on paper, his death certificate says that his death was unknown, or he may had supposedly drowned. But there's a chance that he may have attempted, and he may have actually, succeeded. And so we don't know the whole story, but based on what we're gathering, that's what we're hearing. And so that's part of my background. That's part of my history. Right. And a lot of this information is actually new for me. And I actually kind of find it very, like I'm happy to know that, because it helps give me answers in certain things. Like I myself was diagnosed with mild depression, I think almost 2 years ago. And when I found out that my dad struggled with depression, I was like, oh, I inherited it from him. Here I am thinking that I was the broken one, but I probably inherited it from him. And he does come from a family of mental illness. So I was like, but I didn't know that. It took me like later to find out.
It takes an enormous amount of courage to talk about family issues with mental illness, because we've got to bring this sort of out into the open. It's an enormous problem. I have a son who struggles with mental illness, and we have got to take the stigma away from this and get out there and talk about this stuff and help folks. I've had some very interesting guests on this topic. It could be a podcast all in and of itself, to talk about these particular issues. So I salute you for sort of sharing that. Do you think that has steered you into some of your veteran advocacy things, and is part of the foundation for the Holding Down the Fort podcast?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, when I met Scott, and he's focused on working with the military community. I really had to do a lot of inner work and get a lot of help to get to a place where it's like, okay, like I can be involved in the community. I can help the community. Because, for a long time after losing my dad, and oddly enough, my mom would be like, oh, if you go to school and you get a bachelor's, you can become an officer in the military. And I was like, Mom, like, I don't want to join the military. Like, do you remember what happened? Like, do you remember like what happened to us? And so I really just had this, I had this stigma, like toward the military community. So when I met Scott, I really had to work through that and really come to a place of acceptance. And in the work that we do with our company at US Vet Wealth, Scott and our team at the time when we all started working together, they were all veterans. And for me, it's like, well, I'm not a veteran. However, what we found when we were working with our clientele is no matter, if we do work with a service member or a veteran and we talked about their finances, at the end of the day, it's the spouse that's going to have the final say, duh. And so we found kind of that disconnect every time we would talk to a number of our guests. And so it made sense for me to start building relationships with the families, with the spouses, the real decision makers, I think, of the household. And so hence that's how Holding Down the Fort came into existence, because it's really our opportunity. I mean, it serves a number of things. Like, one, it's for us to build that relationship with military spouses and families and understand their struggle. But also it was a self-healing experience for me, to know that the things that I went through were not abnormal, to know that struggle is real in the military community. And there's a reason why I'm an entrepreneur today, and I have been for the last decade, because like I moved around so much. Like, how do I know how to stick to one job if I've moved around, like
Right.
every 2 to 3 years? And so, and then also, yeah, just understanding. I I think the one thing that I keep getting reminded, because I feel like when you're in the military community, you're in this bubble, is that only less than 1% of Americans serve. And so I think that there could be a lot of misconception about the military community if you're not in it. Most people, when they think of military, they think of soldiers going to war, but you don't think about the families. You don't think about like who else is sacrificing their lives, to protect you so that you can have an opinion. you
Hmm.
know and so that's part of like the work I do with Holding Down the Fort, is bringing voice to the voiceless, I think, or those who don't get as much recognition as the service member. And yeah, I mean, I just have a very special place working for veterans, obviously, because Scott is a veteran. And I don't know, I just really love humanizing them, if that makes sense, and validating like why they have certain issues after the military. So yeah, it's interesting how it's all come in full circle, to be here as, coming from that military family background to now continuing to serve military families and veterans today.
You got ties to San Diego, but now you live in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. Uh,
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about the connection with the Rosie Network, and they recognized you last November as
Yeah,
what was it, media professional. You have a degree in media relations.
I do. I have a bachelor's in journalism media studies with an emphasis in public relations. Now,
Okay.
I didn't use it in the traditional sense. Like, I didn't, end up going to a PR firm or anything. I did start my own social media agency for a number of years, but in terms of the traditional sense, I didn't. But yeah, so about the Rosie Network. So Scott was actually a cohort of their program back in the day, a couple years ago, and we actually used to work out of their office. And
Was he
the
living
interesting,
in San Diego at the time?
yeah, it's how we
Okay.
met.
Yeah, well,
So
I was curious about his travel. So,
yeah.
Scott's a West Pointer, and so unusual for a West Pointer to be in San Diego.
Yes, yeah. He I remember in the early stages of us meeting, he always pointed out how he felt like an outsider because it's a Navy town.
Right.
San Diego's a Navy town, and he's like one of the few Army people out there. But the reason why he came out there is because his mentor, that he worked with in the financial firm in Germany after he got out of the military, he was I think he used to live in San Diego, and he was a former Navy. He's a Navy vet, but
Right.
he had encouraged Scott to go to San Diego, and he was going to refer business. I'm sure Scott has probably told you the story. He felt abandoned in San Diego, so he had to figure it out for himself, and
But
that's
he had a
actually
rendezvous with you. He just didn't know that yet.
exactly, yeah. So he often says that the one good thing that came out of San Diego was me and my dog. So
Well, I'm sure it's a
meeting our
great
dog,
thing. I'm sure it's a
yeah.
great thing. So, help me a little bit. I'm learning this podcasting thing. How did you decide, what was the thing that triggered you to jump into podcasting in the beginning, And
Yeah.
then tell me a little bit about the early days of being a podcaster, because I can tell you, I haven't made every mistake in the book, but I sure have made a lot of them so far.
Well, yeah, I think I could definitely go back to talking about how I got started. Um, I got started almost on accident because I always sort of knew that I wanted to do it. I just didn't. I guess at the time I felt overwhelmed. I felt like, oh, like I have to find web hosting. I have to create this brand. Like, it just seemed so overwhelming, and it seemed like a lot of work. and all I wanted to do was just talk to people.
Right.
But at the time, I think we just moved from Richmond to Virginia Beach. And at this point, I was just feeling really lonely. I uprooted my life, in San Diego. I lived there for 20 years. My friends, my family, my business, like everything was there. And when we moved out here, I was starting from scratch. Um, yeah, I was starting from scratch, and it was really difficult for us to make local connections. We were in Richmond, but we were only there for 7 months. And then when we came to Virginia Beach, I was like, oh, it just seems so difficult to make friends. And so something happened where Scott was invited to be a guest on someone else's show, and they were having technical difficulties. So this guy had him use this alternative platform to do the interview. And I'm not going to mention the name because I don't use it anymore. But this platform was the key for me to realize how easy it was to start a podcast. So, like, no joke, Bob, like, I think that following week I heard about that platform. I created 4 different podcast shows. Like,
4.
yeah, I've narrowed it down to 2. And I have a third one that's just like on hiatus right now because I picked up another, I host another podcast show now that I get paid professionally to do it, which I'm really, really proud of for that. But part of the reason why I started is, first of all, just to kind of work through my bouts of loneliness. It was really difficult for me to make local friends, and I needed to make friends somehow. So I thought, well, podcasting is a great way to engage with people and to get to know people. And it's very intentional. Like as an introvert, so I'm introverted. I'm what they call a social introvert, which means that I will socialize to the point where I need to unplug and I need to, re-energize and be by myself. But I still very much love socializing. Not all introverts are shy. That's not true. And so I felt like early on, podcasting just really fulfilled that kind of that need for me to socialize, but kind of do it within boundaries. It's like, okay, I will only talk to you from this time to this time, and I'll follow up with you again if you want to do a follow-up interview, etc. But it initially just started with that desire to build relationships, and it quickly escalated to our marketing tool for our business. And so here we are. It was crazy because I didn't really intend to be an award-winning podcast show. I was really doing this podcast, at least holding down the fort, at least to do market research and understand military families and be aware of what's available today for them. And so it was just an easy way to get to connect with decision makers and the movers and shakers of our community today. And and then I guess long story short, it just the Rosie Network was putting it out there that they were doing awards, and everyone in my Holding Down the Fort community helped me get nominated. And then the judges chose our show. So it's really humbling, to know that, like, in the short amount of time that I started podcasting, that I could create such an impact so quickly. And I also just want to give myself a pat on the back for rather than just dwelling in my loneliness and my depression, I did something about it. I rechanneled that for something good. And it's just nice to know that I'm able to help people today in that way. And that's kind of it. I hope that helps answer your question.
I had no idea how to do a podcast 9 months ago, but I had a classmate of mine has a very successful podcast, a guy named Douglas Burdett, who has the marketing book podcast. So he was interviewing authors of marketing books, and I would listen to him. And one of the books was about content networking. I think is actually the title of the book. And
I like that.
It's just, podcasting is a great way to get to meet people. So here I am, I'm on the podcast. You and I are going to spend, half an hour or so together. We build a relationship, we create some content. And so I've accomplished a couple of things. I've met somebody new. I've gotten to know them well. We've created some content together that hopefully is interesting to other folks. And, we can do a lot with it. And it's also kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Some of my podcast guests, have kind of popped into the news 2 or 3 months later. And all of a sudden you'll see a pickup and people are, listening to that particular episode again because, that person's going to pop up on the Google search, right?
Right.
So, podcasting has been a great thing. Now, I didn't know where to start. So in my case, I got some college interns and I said, I want to do a podcast, figure it out. And The first few episodes, I have to apologize to my early guests. I was atrocious. I was atrocious. I hope I'm getting better. If you're gonna, if have you learned some lessons about podcasting that maybe you can share? I mean, if you're good
Sure.
at it.
Oh, thanks, Bob. I think for me, why I keep doing it, and I've done I think on average, because I do a lot of interviewing shows myself, and even this week alone, I'm probably going to do nearly 20. And that's not me
I mean,
getting
I'm not the
interviewed.
only one on your list this week. Oh my goodness. Now I'm hurt.
Sorry, I'm sorry. No, but we have this time together, and that's what matters. Let's
That's
focus
right.
on right now, Bob. Um, no, but I think for me, the secret to at least being a good podcast host is just having that general curiosity to want to understand people. Like for me, I feel like I've been kind of crafting this mission statement of mine for some time now. And this is I'll share it right now, and this is going to be as polished as it's going to be. So my desire with podcasting is to find common ground through conversation and storytelling so that we could explore collaboration, like collaborative opportunities, or just, discover how we can coexist with one another. And that's really important to me because as someone who does have mild depression, I read this really good book that I recommend to everyone. It's called Upward Spiral by Alex Korb. So it's like downward but upwards, the upward spiral. And it talks about how do you proactively work on your depression or work through your depression. Yes, there's meds, yes, there's other ways, but how can you take action? And I'm going to spoil the ending for you, Bob, and for our listeners here, because it's the best part of it, but I still think everyone should read it. The end of the book suggests that the best way to work through your depression is to be in community with people. And so that's why I do what I do. One, it serves other people, it makes them, know, like, and trust me. But two, and want to possibly collaborate with me. But two, it's a self-healing experience. It's nice knowing that, even today, like with all the interviews I've done, I mean, a lot of these guests, or even listeners, they'll add me on social media and just, private message me as if we're friends, and which we are. I call everyone my friends, really. And so I think just for that alone, especially since 2020 happened and we all have been forced to be at home, and practice social distancing and everything, I think podcasting has been the perfect medium to still have those quality, fruitful, meaningful relationships with people and be reminded that we're not alone. I think anyone that tries to fight for their unique pain, is self-sabotaging. They're purpose, like they're holding on to that because maybe that's the only thing that they have. And I want you to know, like, you don't have to hold on to that. Like there's a community waiting to nurture you and be there for you and support you and love you and work with you. And you have to have that courage and that willingness to do that, and to have that general curiosity to seek out that kind of community. And so, long answer there, but really to answer your question, it's like just having that general curiosity to find community in anyone you interact with, and understanding that we may come from walks of life, like all different walks of life, but we're more alike than we are different. And that's really my primary goal when I interview people is, okay, what can I find in common with this person? And I get a kick out of it. It's like, it's a game for me, to just try to get to know them and be like, oh, we have that in common. We have that in common. That's cool. It doesn't matter what we look like, we share this in common, and that's what I love the most about it. And what I encourage podcasting hosts to, to carry as well, to have that kind of attitude, especially if you're doing like an interview based podcast show.
I think COVID has caused so much isolation. We talked about the mental health issues, and COVID is a force multiplier for mental illness.
Absolutely.
So I think that what you're doing is very important. So here's a thing, and I pride myself in this, but I'm going to ask you, what's one little thing about you that maybe people don't know that would be an interesting little trivia fact? One of my guests, a guy named Chris Bug. I don't know if you know Chris. He's from the Virginia Beach area. He was a F-18 fighter pilot. And, he was in the movie Bull Durham when he was a kid. So, is there some little secret that I could get Jen to tell us about you that maybe people wouldn't know? That's my challenge. Oh, we may not be able to crack the ice on this one, folks. I'm looking at it.
No, I have one. It's
Okay.
it's not really like what it's kind of maybe like it's more of like a maybe like, oh, that like I can't believe that. So I come from a family of farmers, but I don't have a green thumb. So we've tried, like Scott and I have tried gardening and we've failed like a number of times. And right now, my mom actually mailed me succulents from California a couple of weeks ago, and I'm trying my best to help them stay alive. But I'm just not good at it. So I would say that's like one thing people don't know about me that probably would think that I would do is like I would be a gardener, I'd have a green thumb, but because I come from a family of farmers, but I am not good at gardening like at all. Like
My wife can put a stick in the ground and it will grow. I don't know how she does it.
Yeah,
Because
not me.
I will kill a plant faster than you can count. So, one of the interesting little tidbits we got out of a guy named Todd Connor, who is the founder and CEO of Bunker Labs, in the veteran community, is that he was the mascot for Northwestern University. He dressed up in the cat uniform, the Wildcat.
Wow.
He was the Wildcat. So, interesting fact about Jen Amos. We've been talking with Jen Amos. She is an award-winning podcaster and entrepreneur and host of Holding Down the Fort. Believe it or not, Jen, we've gone 30 minutes and it's time for us to wrap up.
Wow.
I want to get you back on the program at some time. You're a very entertaining guest.
Oh,
I
thank you.
am, and for no other reason than I have learned a lot about being a better podcaster just by having you on the program. Thank you so much for stepping into the spotlight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation today.
And say hello to Scott for me again. Scott Tucker at US Vet Wealth, one of our previous guests on the podcast. So he's an alum. Gosh, I don't know how he's cranking out 50 or 60 podcasts at a time.
Yeah.
Just incredible. Well, you've been listening to the Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. We highlight veterans and military spouses who are making a difference in our community. Really appreciate Jen Amos being on our program today. Thank you so much to you for stepping into the spotlight. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by VeteranCrowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.